Hello, and welcome to the Communicators, a new interview series by Precy, where we chat to expert witnesses to tackle one big question: what makes an effective communicator? I'm Nick Cunner, and this week we're thrilled to have Laura Fox join us to answer this question. Laura is a LinkedIn strategist who, along with other LinkedIn alumni, help companies and individuals use LinkedIn to gain greater reach. Welcome, Laura.
Hi, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Now, Laura, you started working at LinkedIn around 2012. If my memory serves me right, that was just before sort of the company was sold to Microsoft. What was it like in those earlier days? And also, tell us a bit about the journey. I mean, LinkedIn's really grown, and it's not just seen as a platform now to put your CV on. It's central to many businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I joined LinkedIn in 2011, and I remember this so well because I joined weeks before we rang the bell on the New York Stock Exchange. So I just joined. I had this momentous career shift from working in agencies, in ad agencies for many years, to working at this new exciting kind of entity, LinkedIn. And then 3 weeks later, the executive team were ringing a bell on the New York Stock Exchange. So I remember that it was a big moment, and the speech that our CEO gave after that happened about it being right back to your desk, business as usual, let's just do this, was just like a big moment in time. So yeah, the platform has gone through, I mean, you know, from an internal business perspective, from an external perspective, the platform has gone through a seismic shift in that time. You know, from a members perspective, when I joined, I think we were about 135 million members. We were 1,000 employees. Today, there's 18,000 employees, 18 and a half, something like that, maybe 16 and a half. There's over 1 billion members. So just in terms of the size and scale of the platform, it obviously has grown exponentially. And what I find interesting actually is that LinkedIn is growing at its fastest rate ever right now. I mean, when I was there, we used to say that the platform was growing at 3 new members per second. And according to LinkedIn's data, it's now growing at 7 members per second in terms of signups, which is just phenomenal for a tech business that's been around since 2003 to still be growing at this rate. And there's lots of reasons why, and we can talk about that. But the thing that I love about LinkedIn, which is why I still work just on LinkedIn to this day and have spoken about nothing else about LinkedIn since 2011 when I joined, is that it's really stayed very true to its original purpose, which is to create economic opportunities for the global workforce. It is a networking platform, even though it gets bucketed together in people's minds in social media. It is the largest professional network in the world, and it still delivers on that promise of creating economic opportunities for people. So I think whilst it's changed a lot, I think it's really stayed true to its kind of core vision and mission.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back myself. It must have been a similar time you joined LinkedIn's when I probably first uploaded, 14 years ago. Wow, it's a long time. But and it, it really was about that CV, and it's almost, you meet someone I meet and you go through, oh, okay, I get them, to being in a place where you generate actual leads and talk business. You talk about that networking, and so many businesses now I've spoke to going, well, we put our effort in our LinkedIn page. We have a web page just to be there. LinkedIn's where we're at the heart. So it's seeing how that's developed, and also maybe with the rise of social media, we are talking and interacting differently now anyway. So how's that changed from? I mean, it was digital, but it's almost 14 years ago. Feels a different world.
Yeah.
And with the growth of social media.
I think that in people's minds, sometimes when they think back, and this is very much like legacy thinking, but when we think back to how LinkedIn became quite famous in its early days for disrupting the talent space And LinkedIn's, has multiple business lines, multiple monetized revenue streams within the business. And its largest one, which is still the largest one today, but the others have most definitely caught up and catching up, was talent solutions, which, the products and services that it developed to help recruiters hire. So in people's minds, people sort of thought about it as your online CV, place that you go to look for your next job. And it still delivers on that. But I think where the platform has shifted considerably is where the conversations are now happening, as you said. So, people are using it to share stories. I think storytelling is a really big part of how people, or what people want to see on LinkedIn and what they come for. People are using it for networking. They're using it for personal branding. They're using it for reputation building. Sales and marketing teams are using it to market and sell their products and services, whether it's B2B or even B2C as well. It's an incredible learning platform in many, many different ways. So I think that because there is a weight of people on there having conversations about things, it is absolutely a place that companies want to be involved. It feels like a very safe space for them to have conversations with their customers, with their partners, with their stakeholders, with their employees, with future talent. And so people just feel very comfortable. And I think, especially since COVID, I mean, LinkedIn already had a very substantial business before COVID, but I think when we all started working differently, and people were working digitally and remotely, and the whole world changed, people were looking to LinkedIn, maybe companies that were dipping their toe, that weren't fully engaged in using the platform for communicating. I think businesses realized that if you couldn't go out there and meet your partners, suppliers, stakeholders, all of those people, how do you talk? And LinkedIn became a really prominent platform, and that hasn't gone away, which might be one of the many reasons why the growth has just continued to snowball in the last kind of 5 years or so.
And have you seen how business people are engaging with the platform in a different way? So, I mean, one in how they embrace it and, have discussions and comments, but also the mediums and the techniques used. I think we've gone from, so I think they tried blogs at one point, didn't really take off, but those posts, people still embrace them. And more recently, they've really embraced video, with something which they didn't historically, maybe 2 years ago, but much more recently.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is obviously, again, going back from the early days, LinkedIn has built lots of different ways for people to communicate, whether it's through, like you said, blog style kind of long form articles, which are still used, and for the right type of content, the right type of conversation can be really helpful and still get good engagement. And now they get housed together in newsletters, and some people are having extraordinary success with newsletters. But as you say, video has been probably the biggest shift in LinkedIn, I'd say, in the last year. I mean, we're seeing video getting 5 times more engagement than other content forms at the moment. We're seeing a 36% increase year on year in the amount of video that's being posted onto LinkedIn. I am investing more in my own video on LinkedIn. I'm telling my clients to do it. And LinkedIn's adopted a kind of TikTok style For You page style video feed, and we're seeing kind of changes, even on a week to week basis, and how video is showing up on your mobile, how it's showing up on your desktop news feed. And video is just a brilliant way for anyone, including senior leaders, to be able to connect with their audience in a very human, authentic, personal way. And I don't think, as well, if we think back, and I worked in agency, ad agencies, where we created a lot of content, a lot of corporate content sort of 20 years ago, where we'd have big production crews and expensive video production happening. But actually now the expectation is we don't need that. we can have a clip mic, we can have a little light that clips on the phone, like video. iPhones can take, or other phones can take, really high quality video. It doesn't have to have these big kind of high value production kind of teams that are making video for senior leaders. People love the behind the scenes style video. I think going back to that point around stories, we can tell stories in a very simple way with technology that we can fit into our pocket. So yeah, video has been, the big shift, I think, and I think it's only going to become, more used more and more.
And we'll get on to the tactics and strategies you deliver for clients, which is fascinating, seeing how you help sort of clients grow their LinkedIn reach. But just to move away from LinkedIn very quickly, how do you find LinkedIn plays in with wider commercial sort of strategic communications goals? How does it play with a web page? I say people hardly use web pages. How does it play with business cards? I go to so many events now, people go, oh no, we'll just do that LinkedIn thing.
Yeah.
How has it just changed the way the sales process works now? People doing outreach via LinkedIn instead of cold call, and how does it fit into the wider sort of marketing suite, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think that people are coming to LinkedIn to do many different things. They're coming to LinkedIn to have a place online where they can manage their own professional profile and their own personal brand. They're coming to LinkedIn to have it as this online Rolodex, that online file of facts, that pocket of business cards that people used to carry around or have on their desks, which they can now carry in real time in their pocket all of the time. And thirdly, I think people are coming to learn and for industry insights and trends, and so all these things are happening anyway. And it's a destination for people to come for kind of that business and professional, because obviously LinkedIn only operates within a professional context, unlike other platforms. And so if people are coming anyway, it's about slotting in to the experience they're having in a meaningful and valuable way, so that when I'm there doing what I'm coming to do, I might learn something or read something or watch a video about somebody that I'm interested in professionally. I think all the other tools that you talked about, particularly web pages, are still important. I actually don't have a website for my own business, which I've talked about doing and meaning to do for years and years and years. And I think once in the 6 years that I've been running my business, somebody's asked me for my web page. But obviously for large businesses, then yes, they still need a website. You still need to have a destination, a home for your business. It still needs to be SEO'd so that people are Googling you. But the thing is, that executive's LinkedIn profile is probably going to come up in the top 5 search results on Google anyway. But yes, I still think you need to have a place. If you're writing articles or if you're press releases, you still need to have a destination, website for that content. Business cards, do I think business cards are necessary? Not really. I mean, I never had them when I was at LinkedIn. LinkedIn used to have this really cool piece of functionality where you could press a button on the app and it would tell you who in the vicinity was there, and you could connect with them. We had to get rid of that for various different trust and safety reasons, but still there is a button on the app that you can press where you can show someone your QR code and immediately you can connect with them. And for me, that's so much more helpful than having a business card, a piece of paper in my pocket, or that I'm going to throw away. I'd rather just connect with someone, because that is going to stay with me for life when I move on to different meetings. And so I just think that some of those things we absolutely need, but doing other things are probably just super outdated now. Even digital business cards are replacing paper cards, etc. So I just think that in some ways, it's that old-fashioned kind of saying, fish where the fish are. I think that if people are coming on LinkedIn to do other things, there's an opportunity to communicate with them whilst they're there.
There's definitely going to be a few senior managers in the financial services when you say that those contacts come with you will be worried. I've heard stories about people confiscating business cards when they move on and things like that. But the world's changing and people have to adapt. Well, thanks so much, Laura. So we'll dive in deeper and ask some more questions along those lines and maybe talk a bit more about strategy. But before we do, I'd just like to take a moment to tell our listeners a bit more about Preci. So, Preci, we are specialists in communications, helping organizations achieve their commercial objectives, whether that's raising their profile, boosting revenue, or attracting new clients and investors. We combine traditional PR and public affairs engagements with marketing and content-led strategies, focusing in on developing the outcomes our clients need, not just ticking the boxes. Now, Laura, you've been supporting companies and business personalities to grow their LinkedIn reach. Is it all about the killer content, or do they need to do something else as well?
When I work with people, the starting point is always their profile, because no matter what you do on LinkedIn, and people that have worked with me have heard me say this 1,000 times over, whether you connect with someone, whether you post something, whether you engage with someone else's content, whatever you're doing, the first thing that people do is they look at your profile. If I connect with you, you're going to look at my profile. If I comment on a post that you've done, you're going to go, who's that? Let me look at their profile. So the starting point is always the profile for me when I'm working with someone, whether that's a senior leader at a FTSE 100 company, or whether that's a small business owner that I'm working with, because the profile is kind of the heartbeat of what you do on LinkedIn. And with that, it's about not just what you say, it's covering all of the kind of the technical expertise, but also the personality, particularly when we're speaking with senior leaders, because when we're looking at senior leaders and senior execs, it's also about their leadership style, what they believe in, what drives them, that is going to interest and motivate their employees, partners, etc. So that's one side of it. There's also visuals. I mean, LinkedIn in the old days used to be a very kind of text-based, two-dimensional page, a little bit like a digital CV, but it's not anymore. There's a place to add content on there that people can read and follow up on. So there's all of those different things that we look at. We also look at, very boring things like settings, because we want to make sure that people can be found. So you could do all the great work on content, but if actually your profile is in some way hidden, which I come across all the time, then it kind of defeats the purpose. So there's a whole piece of work to do around profile, and depending on how good the profile is to start with, that could take an hour, that could take half a day, it really depends. I've also worked with senior leaders who didn't even have a profile. So you're literally starting from scratch, that still happens. So that's always the starting point. Then once you've got that and you've got that foundation and everyone's happy with it, it's then thinking about, okay, why are we here? What are our objectives? Who are we here for? And then what do we want to say? So that's the kind of the next part of the process, which again, depending on the person, and I'm thinking about this through the lens of individuals as opposed to company pages, although it's a similar kind of strategy for that. Sometimes there's other people involved, you might have comms teams, you might have agencies like yours, you might have EAs or PAs that are, can be helpful. So it's very much a collaborative effort in working out not just what the content strategy is going to be, but also the process behind that in getting things live, approved, all of that type of thing as well. So
if I was a senior leader, senior business leader, and I want to grow my profile within a particular industry, and you're going to come and help me with the concept, but how much can you help is free, and how much should they be thinking about investing money into boosting a post or doing LinkedIn advertising, and not just on the sense of in monetary? Is there anything they need to think about data wise to actually find the best target audience they want to speak to? And particularly, and sorry, I'm throwing lots of questions here at you, but one area I find that's interesting is, people, particularly senior leaders, have great networks within their own industry, but sometimes they need to speak to investors who may be in New York or, you know, in a different zone, who look across different industries. How do you reach those people?
Yeah, those are great questions. So generally speaking, I am a big fan and proponent that you can get loads of value from LinkedIn for free. You know, what you get access to as a free member can give you great rewards by showing all, you know, all the investment is your time and resource in having a profile and being active on the platform from a content perspective and from an engagement perspective, commenting, engaging, that type of thing. However, depending on what your objectives are, and you as an individual, or as, you know, as the business that you represent, sometimes putting a bit of money behind it, whether that be in having a premium profile or, as you said, sponsoring some content to reach a wider audience, can be extremely helpful. And so I do that with lots of people that I work with. You know, for example, I was working with a senior leader at a very large global household name business that you would know, and they were opening a new office in a new market. So that person was in market doing a launch event, and we put some money behind to sponsor that post so that we could let the business community know in that region, this business is here. And it did exactly that. We were able to get in front of competitors, partners, suppliers, you know, potential talent, to let them know that that business was setting up a presence. And that is very helpful, because obviously when you put a post out as organically on your profile, the potential reach is your connections. And what boosting or sponsoring does, and those two things are a bit different, but what they ultimately do is they get you in front of people that you're not already connected to. So yeah, it opens up LinkedIn's audience to a much wider reach. There was another example that I spoke to, another senior leader of another business last week, and I noticed that a post that they put out had blown up, and I was like, what happened on that post? And she said, well, we put some paid behind it, and that had increased followers. It had obviously increased engagement on the post very widely. So it can be really helpful to put some money behind it, but it doesn't, depending on who the audience is, it doesn't need to be tons and tons. So I said it depends. It goes back to what the objectives are for that person being there and for that piece of content.
Fascinating. And one question I know pretty much every business leader is dying to ask: do those cold LinkedIn messages they get pinged up every day work? And should they listen to those sort of cold sales?
I guess you're talking about when you get one of those like cold messages in your inbox. I mean, I remember when we launched our sales solution business at LinkedIn, which is the suite of tools that sits under the umbrella of Sales Navigator, that was kind of developed for the sales market. There was like this internal phrase that's, you know, I heard mentioned, that says, no one likes it cold. And that's so true. I mean, who likes a cold call? It used to be that people would phone you on your landline and try and sell you something. And now people are doing that digitally. I mean, do you respond to that? Probably not. Do I respond to that? And I get messages, particularly from senior people, saying, how do I turn that stuff off? And there are settings that you can change so that you can stop the inbound flow. Because if you're in HR, if you're a senior leader, you probably get tons of this stuff. I know I get, lots of inbound messages of people trying to sell me web services, or, scale your business 10x, or have 100 leads a week, or whatever. We all get them. Do we reply? I don't think we do. So I personally am not a fan of the cold message. I don't think that we need to ever have a cold message. LinkedIn's data and what we can learn from someone's profile, from their activity. If you're using LinkedIn's paid for tools, lots more than that, you don't need to have a cold conversation, because LinkedIn can surface so much information about the person you're trying to get in front of, links into that company, mutual contacts, information on their website. Why do you need to have a cold message. It just doesn't need, you just don't need it these days. And so I just think, no, cold messages, I don't have the data to hand, probably don't work, but warm messages sent in the right way to somebody that you've already built some sort of rapport with is going to be a much, much better plan.
One thing you said earlier, which I found very interesting, was about how your LinkedIn profile is actually, when it comes to SEO, really powerful, and it will pop up. Interesting to learn a little bit more about that, but I'm also quite interested in seeing how you think AI might change, because the way people search maybe through AI now, which is much more intelligent in the sense it's reading more and it's understanding more, and it's taking much more sort of thought leadership and saying, well, actually, it's asking a question: is this person an industry leader? So how do you think AI might change, and what's it kind of look like now as well? Just give people some background.
Yeah. It's a great question, and I'm not the oracle on what AI is doing on LinkedIn, but obviously I do listen to people like Dan Shapiro, LinkedIn COO, talk about, and Ryan Roslansky, their CEO, talk about LinkedIn being an AI first platform. And we've seen lots of changes on the platform as they start to integrate AI into the way that the search is powered, through very practical things like having more skills on the profile, which are acting like keywords were in helping power the search. We're seeing many more integrated AI tools to help you with content writing, profile optimization. And I'd say, some people moan about how the AI is working in that context. And 6 months ago, it was very different to the way it is today. I was doing a one-to-one profile session with someone about a week or two ago. And 6 months ago, if you pressed one of the AI buttons on your profile, like to help you with a particular section, the output wasn't great. When I did it 2 weeks ago, I was so impressed with the return that we got, on an edit on one of their profile sections. So I think that the AI on LinkedIn is developing so fast, and I think it's getting better and better. I think we just have to be, with any AI, whether you're using it to write marketing strategy or to give you a first pass at anything that you're doing, I just think we have to be very careful that there's a human overlay in what we're using it for, because you can now use AI on LinkedIn to generate comments, but they're so obviously comments. The data is also showing that the engagement is poor when that happens. When I get them on my posts, I delete them. You can normally tell it's AI by the way that it's written, or if you look at who's written it, it just doesn't look real. And by the way, I should say LinkedIn is working very, very hard to address that. But obviously with any new technology, there's learning and test and learn, and etc. So I think that LinkedIn is embracing this. I think it's improving all the time. I just think that, especially when we're thinking about content and communicating, that yes, we can lean in to using AI, but we also don't want to get rid of any personality and authentic tone of voice over the top, because it's quite obvious. Don't you think it's quite obvious when we see AI content?
I mean, my last question is actually on that authentic voice. And one thing, when I speak to sort of business leaders, they're worried about bluntly, looking like a bit of a tit on LinkedIn, and they really want to avoid being seen as sort of like a LinkedIn influencer. But what they want to do is influence their sector. They want to be seen as the authoritative voice. So is there a way of doing it without being cringy? And perhaps is a good example of someone who's really doing LinkedIn well, but not necessarily in a sort of LinkedIn influencer sort of cringy way?
I think there's lots of people doing a brilliant job on LinkedIn, and I was listening to Dan Shapiro talking last week, and he talked about John Gray from Blackstone. He talked about Mary Barra from GM. He talked about Daniel Ek from Spotify, and I look at all their profiles and go, yes, these are leaders who have an authentic voice. I think that where people show up and speak in a human way that is right and relevant for them, I think you don't get the ick, and I think you don't end up looking like you don't want to be perceived. I think where people fall in the trap where we see every day is people using language, when we hear this, we see it mocked in lots of places now. I'm honored and humbled and all of that stuff. Like that is not what people are coming onto LinkedIn for. I think the days of self-promotion are over. And I think that's the thing. I think that there is a historical perception that people will come onto LinkedIn for self-promotion. And I think that self-promotion has been replaced with storytelling. And I think that stories can shape industry conversations. And I think if you take the I out of it, and then you're sharing things that have value and that are interesting and relevant to the people that you're there to engage with, then that's when it's not cringy. I think if you're inserting your own perspective and looking to inwards, that's when it can start to feel uncomfortable for other people to read and put other people off. So I think always thinking about who your audience is, why you're writing this piece of content, what it is that you're trying to say, and putting other people's challenges and perspectives in the mix of what you're saying. I think that, and avoiding all that cheesy language, I think tends to be a safer place for people to operate in.
Thanks so much, Laura. I've been Nick Connor, and you've been listening to The Communicators, an interview series by Parisi. Now, if you have any questions for us or Laura, drop them in the comments, and please don't forget to give us a like. Be sure to tune in next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.